Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Well, at the end of last week's video, I said I wanted to move on and do something else for a couple of weeks before getting back to finishing off that Lynchburg area that I showed you. However, I looked at my schedule of videos that I've got planned, and I really need to finish this off. So today we'll be taking a look at preparing and installing turnouts off of the main line that take us off to the Lynchburg switching area. And we'll be doing a single turnout that leads off of the main line, and then we'll be doing two turnouts combined into a crossover. So let's go ahead and get started. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Okay, I've zoomed in close here so we can go ahead and get started with this. Now this is a standard number 6 right-hand MicroEngineering turnout. Now this is the frog. You'll notice that it's a one-piece casting here, and it's isolated on each end. So it's already pre-isolated for us. The frog rails out here, these are dead. They are not connected to these here, so it doesn't feed through. So whatever power you have on the rails that connect to these two are what will power them. And the same thing for these here. So you don't need to worry about powering your individual rails within this turnout. Also, this is a DCC friendly turnout. You'll note right here, they've already added jumpers between the stock rail and the rails, the closure rails on each side. So whenever the stock rail is powered, this rail here will be powered as well. Same thing on this side. So everything is prepared for you. All you have to do is connect this turnout to powered rails at each end, and you're covered, no problems at all. You'll note right here there's this little dot of metal, and that is part of this casting. And that is there for you to be able to attach a wire to power this frog. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And all I do to repair it is take a very small flat file and file that area down real good so that it's nice and clean. Hit it with a wire brush to get all the crud off of there, and we're ready to solder to that. We'll do that in a minute. Now, down at this end, you'll notice that with these turnouts, they're built so that you can flick them with your finger and they'll stay put. They've got a little spring in there that holds them in place. And a lot of turnouts are made like this. I believe the new Walthers turnouts, Pico turnouts, and of course these MicroEngineering all have this feature. But you'll find that they all tell you to remove it if you're going to be using these with a switch machine of any kind, because it will increase the life of the turnout as well as the switch machine once that is removed. So the first thing you want to do then is remove this little spring here. And all there's this little plastic cover plate right here that's been glued in place, and I just sent it into a high Earth orbit. And it just pops right off with a pair of tweezers or a knife blade, whatever. It just pops out of there. It's not held in very well. And then there's this little spring, which just popped out as well. So that's all it is that does your centering action. So once you take that out, it's taken care of. Then it won't stay in place, but it will move freely when you use your switch machine. Okay, so now that we've got that taken care of, we've got the frog prepared, what I want to do next is add the wire to power the frog. So I've got a piece of wire here. It's a solid number 20 gauge hookup wire, and you can see I've put a little dog leg here at the end. And that's so when I solder it, it's going to sit flat and have a good pad that it's going to solder to. So I would put that right down on here. So what I want to do then is pre-tin both of these so that once we get ready to do the final soldering work, it's going to happen very quickly, and it's not going to take a lot of heat to do it. Okay, I have this old container of Radio Shack rosin soldering flux. Now, a lot of solder these days comes with flux in the center of it, and so you might not need this. I use this simply because I'm going to be applying a lot of heat right there to a very small spot. And as a result, you can end up burning away that rosin before it has a chance to actually work. So I add a little extra rosin just in case I need that. Okay, now it's a good idea to work on a nice flat surface like this piece of plywood that I use for my workbench, because if you do apply a lot of heat and the plastic starts to soften, then your casting, your frog, can actually move around, and you don't want to do that. But if it's held firmly against a flat surface like this, it's going to be it's going to stay in place. So I'm going to start heating this with my soldering iron tip and adding a bit of solder to that, because we want to form a nice little mound of solder right here on the frog. So I'm going to just let that sit there and heat until that melts into place. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is melt a little bit of solder onto the base of this little dog leg that I created, so that when I do attach it like this, put it right down here, hit it with just a little bit of heat, it's going to melt and it's going to stay put. Like that. And what I do is, just to make sure, I give it a good tug. So there, that turnout is now ready to be installed. Now, one question that came up during the week last week, someone had broken off some spikes on one of their turnouts while they were creating one of these crossovers. And they asked me how to fix it. Well, as it turned out, I had a turnout that I had broken off a couple of spikes right here. And I had fixed it quite recently. So I'm going to show you how I did that. And basically it involves these little spikes right here. I'll show you how tiny these are. So these are very, very small, as you can see right here on the end of my finger. They're very tiny spikes. The heads aren't that much bigger than the cast-in spikes, but they do a great job of holding. Now, I got these from MicroEngineering, a whole little bag of them for this kind of stuff, and it's not expensive, but they do work very well. But you do have to look around, because you can end up with various sizes of these spikes. Some of them will be so big that the flanges of your rolling stock and locos will bounce over them. Once these guys are installed, they're almost the same height as the cast-in spikes. Okay, so what do? Well, I simply took a pin vise drill bit, and I think this is a number 70, and I drilled holes right here at the base of the rail into the tie at these three positions here, because these are the three spikes that got broken off. And then it was a simple matter of taking the spikes and pushing them down through that hole until they were lined up against the rail here, the base of the rail inside here. And you could put these on both sides if you've broken both pieces off. And you can probably see, hopefully see, there they are, the spikes where they come through on the bottom. So these will just get pushed into the cork road bed. But I wanted to do this beforehand because I wanted to fix this and not knock any more spikes loose while doing this project. So it's a very easy thing to do, and they hold very well. And like I say, you can hardly tell that they're there. That's where the spike heads are. And I've run locomotives across these guys. Rolling stock, not a problem. So that's how you fix busted spikes. Let's proceed with preparing the two turnouts to make a crossover. On this one here, I've already cut out a section of the ties and one of the rails, and I'll show you that on the other one. This is one that I was preparing a couple of months ago to use on the layout, and I ended up not completing it at that time, so now was as good a time as any to put it in here. So what I do is I just lay these over top of each other like this in the position that they're finally going to be in. And then if you look at this, you can count from the notch here at the end of the frog out. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 ties on each one of these sections. So this one, I've already removed a number of them. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I already took out 6 ties on this one. So on this side, I only need to remove the first 5 ties in order to get them to match up. So that comes to right here. Okay, so I counted back 5 ties, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. And I'm going to just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, cut through the webbing on each side. Now that should be free, if we can just get it started, to slide out of there. Like that. So now we have an alignment like this. You'll note that there's already the rail located here, so we don't need this rail here. Fortunately, it's not held tightly, so we can slide it out. When you're doing that, be careful not to knock your spikes loose. And this one is already set up here. Now another thing to prepare, check for any overlapping ties. So like these first 3 here overlap with 3 here. So I'm going to cut these back a bit. And we'll see, are those going to work? Need to do one more here. Okay. And now, let's check it one more time. Okay, I don't see any more overlapping ties, so we should be good to go. Let me adjust these here a bit. There. What we want to do next is slowly slide the rails into place in the spike heads so that we can get these to work together, go back together. And if you do it very, very carefully and very slowly, you won't break those little spike heads loose. And you'll end up with a crossover just like that. Now, at that point, there's no problems. Everything will be powered. Everything will work without any issues. Now, let's flip it over and prepare the frogs. Now that we've got the crossover and the turnout prepared, it's time to go back over to the main line on the benchwork and drill the holes for the frog droppers or the feeders, as well as connecting these guys together. Okay, so I've got the turnout that is going to go off to the right and off to Lynchburg, laid in its position. So I want to mark the location of where the feeder hole needs to be placed. Now in this location, I'm going to connect to the end of this set of rails, and then come into this point right here in the center and make a mark on the cork using this red Sharpie marker. And then I'll be able to drill a hole between those 2 marks and feed the feeder right on down. Now as far as the throw rod for the tortoise switch machine, I'm going to make a mark here, a mark here, a mark here, and a mark right here. So I've got 4 marks that I can cross, and I'll be able to put my hole exactly where it needs to be. So that's that one. We'll do the same thing with this one right here. So I'm going to make a mark here, a mark here, a mark right here, and another mark right here, so that we can find those positions. Now, and I'll show you. So right here is where it's going to be. This one is going to be right there at the crossing. And we'll do the same thing here in a minute as soon as I mark these other locations. Okay, so now I've moved up and we can make marks for the feeders at this frog right here and right there, and move across and do this one the same way. And then we'll come up here and again mark the location for throw rod for the tortoise switch machine. Okay, now I'm going to pull this out of the way and right here's where that hole needs to be for that feeder. There's these guys here, so the hole needs to be halfway between those two. And then we've got these two guys and these guys. So right there at the cross is where that hole for the throw rod needs to go. So let me get my drill out and we'll drill some holes. Okay, let's get started right here. I've got my tray under here to catch the dust. And we'll go right on through. Get that one started over there. Next thing, I need to cut out a space where I can do my hole here. So I'm going to cut through the cork and through the road bed down to the plywood. So we don't have to drill through all this stuff and make a mess. See if we can pick that out of there. And now we'll move up and do the holes at the other end. So the next two holes will be right here. Cut down through that. Because the thickness of the plywood and the 1/2-inch foam on sandwich is over 1 inch, I cut a slightly oversized hole instead of the 1/4-inch hole that Circuitron recommends. I use a 3/8 inch hole. So that gives that throw rod a little bit of extra room to throw. Next, before installing the turnout, we'll apply some adhesive. And again, this is my liquid nails for projects. The thing I like about liquid nails for projects is it's water soluble, so it's easy to clean up, and it doesn't have any of the nasty chemicals that attack foam. So you can use it on foam without any problems at all. And I've had good luck installing turnouts directly on the foam using this stuff. I don't do it in many places. I typically use cork road bed instead, but you can do that. And at a later date, if you decide you need to move a turnout or change a track alignment, you can usually just slide a sharp knife of some kind underneath of the turnout or piece of track that you want to move, and you can lift it without too much effort. And it comes away pretty clean. Okay, so I've got my turnout that we prepared. Let's slide the frog feeder down through the hole and drop everybody into place. These tools here are still available in sets from Micromark. So check the Micromark catalog under their track laying accessories. And what it is right here, it has 2 slots that will fit on the rails, and it gives you a 2-inch center on this side. I'm not sure what that's for, probably narrow gauge. But you can just put it right on there, and it's going to hold it in perfect alignment until you get everything set in place. So now I'm sliding the rail joiner into place on the end of the turnout here on both sides. Okay, so that one's in place, and we've got a good 2 inches on center there. So now I'm going to set here. I'm going to let this set up, and the adhesive grip very good. While we're waiting for the adhesive over here to dry, I need to install a piece of track to fill in this gap right here. Okay, so that's got that piece laid in there where it's eventually going to end up. And then again, I'm going to place this over top of them. And mark the top of those rails where I want to cut. And take my rail cutters and we'll cut right here. Very conveniently, it's at a gap. We'll recheck it and make sure it came out the right length. Looks good. And take the crossover and put it in place. And that looks like it's going to be a good fit right there. Perfect. Okay. So now we can go ahead and lay this one with adhesive. Okay, I've laid a bead of adhesive here for the track, so let's go ahead and get that done. Started with the wrong side of the blade. Get those slid into place. There we go. And drop it down. Then I'm going to recheck again with my crossover, make sure everything's where it needs to be. Okay, that looks good right there. And I'll pin it in place very quickly so it's not going to wander somewhere. I've drilled the holes up front here for the tortoises, so let's drill this hole right here as well. Okay, now it's time for the final step. We've got all the holes drilled. I've placed the rail joiners on the ends of the track here so that when we drop in the crossover, it's going to fall right into place. So the last thing I need to do is apply the adhesive. And then we'll get that smooth, and we'll drop the crossover into place. I try to keep the adhesive down here where the points are as thin as possible, just so that we won't get any coming up between the ties and gluing the points in place. Okay, so now I've got these guys ready to go. We'll put the feeders in first and get them started down. And bring it down slowly. Feed it into place here and here. Push my spikes down into place here. I'll push the rail joiners into place. I'm going to press down the end of that tie so that everything will go in there. Okay, that one's done. And we'll get this one. There. Okay, those rail joiners are in. Let's get these done. Okay, and slide that rail joiner over there. There. Now that's good. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is insert my T-pins again and hold these firmly in place while the glue is, or the adhesive is setting up. And give it a good roll. Make sure we've got that adhesive set in there. I'll get this adhesive off once it has had a chance to dry. Okay. Put in a couple here as well. Make sure we've got the frog firmly in place. Okay, so we've got the turnout to go to Lynchburg. We've got the crossover so we can get from the right track to the left track and vice versa. So at this point, I just have to let everything finish setting up, and then it will be time to do some wiring. So in the next video, we will drop a couple of more feeders to the main track, get everything wired up so that it's powered at least to the end of the track here. And then I do want to install, I've got 3 tortoises to install here and 1 to install back down at the turnout at the entrance to the tunnel. So that will be next week. We'll get caught up with the wiring and with the tortoise installations. And then the next thing after that, I've got to design, build, and wire up a control panel for this section of the model railroad. So a couple of different topics coming at us over the next few weeks. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. Hopefully I've answered a lot of the questions that have been coming up over the last couple of years about how to prepare and install turnouts on a model railroad. And really what I showed you was, some ways is specific to microengineering, but it's not all that different from any other types of turnouts that are available on the market today, because it's pretty basic stuff. So have a great weekend and a great week, and I'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.